I'm always enamored, and by enamored, not enamored at all, with human beings' capacity for self delusion. Essentially, the things that they convince themselves that are not true. Elizabeth Warren, who appropriated the Native American culture, who appropriated Bernie Sanders' effectively entire campaign, is now trying to appropriate the Bernie blackout. Now, if you remember, when Sanders first got into the race, for the longest time, media tried to act as if he wasn't there. He was the clear leader early on, clear number two for the longest time, and they would still act as if he had no chance. MSNBC going so far as to say, well, hey, we were told that it's kind of sexist for Sanders to even remain in the race and for people to support Sanders, considering Warren has a better plan, is more well-liked, etc., etc., etc. None of that is true anymore. And the candidate, who at one point had popped all the way up to either the number one or number two spot, has since collapsed outright, entirely, nearly down to single digits. In Sanders' case, they literally were trying to pretend as if Sanders wasn't there. They literally, on MSNBC and CNN, try to find ways to make it look as if his campaign wasn't as strong as it was, that he was the white candidate. And again, when all else fails, just pretend as if the guy is not standing there. In some cases, they would either leave his name off the poll. In one case, they put his vote tally in the other vote tallies. The blackout was real. The difference here is he forced them to acknowledge his presence. The fact that he was blowing out stadiums, the fact that the polling was showing him going higher and higher and that he was on a surge. You can't have it both ways. You can't call yourself a credible media organization and ignore reality to such a brazen degree and still retain any level of credibility. So to some degree, he forced them to bring up this notion that he is the strongest candidate. They didn't have a choice but to acknowledge his presence. That's different from Warren. Warren was giving all the media attention in the world. When Warren was flying high, a lot of that flying high was because the media organizations were giving her all sorts of free publicity. Not just free publicity, saying nice things about her, giving all sorts of media attention, acting as if she's the person to beat in the race, etc., etc., etc. And that was even during the time where Joe Biden was still winning that race. They treated her with kid gloves. Well, the moment that she reneged on Medicare for all and people realized she wasn't being serious, her campaign, within the course of just a few months, collapsed. She's the brown line right here. Collapse. In the last two elections, the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire caucus, we have Sanders, of course, winning both, him coming in first place in his context of voting in both of these contests. But in Iowa, he ends up with 24.7. The next closest is Buttigieg with 21.3. The next closest is Warren with 18.5. Meaning in Iowa, Warren came in a distant third. In New Hampshire, she did worse. Sanders, 25.7, Buttigieg, 24.4, Klobuchar, 19.8, Warren, single digits, 9.2. There's a difference between the media blacking out or pretending as if a candidate who is showing support, grassroots supports, in the standpoint of fundraising and from the standpoint of the crowds, these barn-burning speeches that he's been doing. There's a difference between that and trying to ignore that versus losing and failing repetitively and the media moving on to the people who they don't think are going to lose. Meaning, in real world terms, Warren has no path to win the nomination. She doesn't even have the path to win a state. It is foreseeable that she's going to lose her own state, meaning she's going to lose Massachusetts to Sanders. If you cannot win your own state, then you're going to have a hard time making the argument to me on why you are more electable and people should get behind you as opposed to the other person who, for the most part, makes your argument better than yourself. My point is, there is no Warren blackout. There is no invisibilizing of Elizabeth Warren. It's not because she's a woman. It's not because she has a vagina. None of those things are true. Ultimately, Warren just lost. That's like saying they were getting rid of Cory Booker because Cory Booker was black. It's nonsense. Cory Booker just couldn't get the votes. He didn't have the support. And I think what you're seeing with Warren is that with her losing this badly, then the question becomes, does she have a chance to win? And are we going to lavish a huge amount of time on her if we can't even see her winning a state, let alone multiple states, or being a contender from the standpoint of winning this primary process? Not to mention, at the exact same time, you have Bloomberg, who has jumped into the race. Bloomberg, right off the bat, is pulling in second place. This is National Survey USA, but it's not just this poll. There are multiple polls where Bloomberg is showing dominance is the wrong word for it, but at the very least, subsuming Joe Biden's Elizabeth Warren, Buttigieg, and Klobuchar's placement in the context of the polling. And this, again, is across multiple demographics. The reason why I don't think Joe Biden is going to win or has a really good chance in this is because if Joe Biden loses South Carolina, Joe Biden is for the most part out of the race. And with the head of steam Sanders is going to have coming from Nevada, Joe Biden may well lose that state. Bloomberg, Klobuchar, Buttigieg, but at the very least, Bloomberg is going to eat into Joe Biden's numbers, meaning as long as Joe Biden and Bloomberg stay in the race, for the most part, they're going to be feeding off the same blood supply. The same thing is true with Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, with the difference being that they don't have the ability to get Hispanics or African Americans. Essentially, whites are their main constituency, and they're going to get a rude awakening as they go from state to state to state that is not named Iowa or that is not named New Hampshire. Warren's case is slightly different, even though for the most part it boils down to the same. It's the why are you here question. If the media, who's lavished all sorts of attention on her when she was flying high, if the media can't answer the question of why are you here? What is your theory of the case? What is the reason that people should choose you over this other person? If the media can't answer that, if the media can't find a state that you can win, if the media don't see you as winning the process, if the media has a new shiny object named Bloomberg that is in the race, that has started to take a strong positioning in the polling, and if you are losing multiple states, that is not the media invisibilizing you, that is not the media blacking you out, that is not the media pretending that you are not there, that is you almost in real terms just not being there in the standpoint of either the polling or in the standpoint of your ability to win. This is not a blackout. That's the point I'm trying to make. This is Warren just failing. This is what a campaign looks like when it's collapsing. The media is not wrong for it any more than they're wrong for not covering Kamala Harris or not covering Cory Booker. And you can make a case that says, yes, those people are out of the race. That is fair enough. But they're out of the race because they didn't have the support, nor were they able to actually show any clear path to win. Warren, who many people were giving her the benefit of the doubt that she wasn't in this race in order to just kind of sandbag Sanders. That was my theory of the case, that she was in this race to sandbag Sanders. You tell me, a candidate who said they want big structural change, who supposedly had a peace pact, or at the very least had a peace pact as long as they either were winning, were in a strong position, or where they could sandbag that person. But the moment that they no longer believed they had enough votes where they could take away those votes from that person and hobble that person, then they just outright got belligerent and started attacking that particular person. Now, if a person is in the race, that person has no chance of winning that race. There's no clear path for that particular person to win a state, let alone the nomination. That person said they want big structural change and that they're supposedly in this race in order to benefit the left. And that person is belligerently attacking the guy who has the actual best chance of winning for that said left. Then is that person really working on behalf of the left? How can you be trying to cripple one of the other campaigns in the race when you yourself have no path to the nomination but still be working to the benefit of the left? I don't see it. Up to this point, Warren has just started to attack Sanders in this kind of belligerent fashion.
And Culinary 226 did come out and criticize Bernie Sanders for Medicare for All. His supporters really attacked them. Do you feel, and you're someone who's actually come under that attack before, back in Iowa, back in January, do you feel like he's done enough to condemn the culture online that stems from his movement?
I've said before that we are all responsible for what our supporters do. And I think Bernie has a lot of questions to answer.
Yeah, Bernie has a lot of questions to answer. His supporters, who he in no way controls, they're not surrogates. They're independent actors on social media and Twitter. And instead of being able to make a cohesive argument about Sanders, to make a cohesive argument about why she's even in this race, her theory of the case, how she's going to win a state, let alone the convention, why she failed so miserably in the first two states, why those supporters that she would kill and cut her right arm off for don't back her. Why did she lose such support? Instead of dealing with those fundamental questions for the problems of her campaign, she believes that the pathway that is available to her is to lump in with the Bloombergs, with the Hillary Clintons, and with the Joe Bidens of the world, and to attack a guy who's supposed to be her friend and ally and would under no circumstance attack her. That's where Warren is right now. She's doing anything that she can to get any level of publicity, to get any level of buzz and excitement. And unfortunately, it's just not there. She has a new super PAC. Well, that new super PAC, aptly named, quote unquote, Persist, is running a campaign ad that also does not answer that particular question of why Warren is in this race. And until she can answer that question cohesively, all the browbeating and tone policing Sanders supporters in the world is not going to reinvigorate this undead campaign. So I'll leave it here. My basic point is she is not being invisibilized. This is not a situation where she's not there or the media is for whatever reason just ignoring her. They're ignoring her because she lost. This is everything to do with failure. This is not anything to do with her individually or personally. This is not even the same thing of them blacking out Sanders in the beginning, acting as if the guy wasn't standing there. She had her shot. She had her limelight. She had all of this favorable press and attention where they pretended as if Sanders was sexist, pretended if they were sexist, with this kind of promotion of her as being the candidate that can unite the left, the progressive candidate. They even acted as if that woman was actually for Medicare for all. They gave her a chance. She just lost. Her failure is her own fault. They weren't being unfair to her. Sanders never attacked her. Yeah, his supporters went after her because she was running a disingenuous campaign, and it is our job to point out the fact that she's running a disingenuous campaign. Again, if you are in a situation where you're attacking the supporters, not even dealing with the candidate themselves, and these kind of disingenuous attacks that are just entirely there to try to undermine one of his largest, most prolific strengths, meaning his support, then I think you're going to lose to Trump. I think your political instincts are not all that good and not all that great. And I still ask this very basic question of how can you be a friend to the left? How can you be working to the benefit of these big structural changes when at this point you've just become a kamikaze pilot attacking belligerently somebody who is supposed to be your friend and again who has never under any circumstances attacked you? So she's not being blacked out. She's just losing. There's a difference in those things. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys tomorrow.